Hello and welcome to our program Newsroom. I'm your host Sharmeen Ali. The DGISPR has extended an open invitation to the Indian Army to share the exact locations of the alleged terror camps that the Indian Army chief had said that was attacked on Sunday morning when there was an attack in Azad Jammu and Kashmir and a soldier was killed and 6 civilians were killed in that area. Pakistan also invited the Indian envoy in Pakistan to go and visit that area where the attacks took place, along with several other diplomats who were taken to Azad Jammu and Kashmir in order to show them exactly what was over there and what was attacked and what was destroyed, and to debunk the myth that there were any terror camps that existed over there. Also, we will be talking about how the US envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has met with Chinese and Russian and European leaders in order to bring about and talk about how to bring about peace in Afghanistan. And also US Defense Secretary Mark Esper has said on Monday that the Afghans should not think that there will be a sudden withdrawal from Afghanistan like there was in Syria. So we will be discussing all these things on our program today, and also we will be discussing the victory of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Canada, who has won by a narrow victory, and which means that he will be leading a minority government. So let's begin with our discussion with Lieutenant General Talat Masood, who's joined us in the studios today. Sir, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Sir, first of all, now, what happened over the weekend on Sunday was absolutely an abomination. There was an attack on the Azad Kashmir side by the Indian Army, and they had claimed falsely that they were attacking terror camps. Now, a soldier was killed and 6 civilians were also killed over there. So our media wing, ISPR, has offered an invitation. They've extended an open invitation that send us the coordinates and tell us where are those terror camps. And there's silence from the Indian side. So what would you like to comment on that?
You see, the main thing is that the Indians want to divert the attention from what is happening in Kashmir. And what they have been trying to project is that there is nothing wrong in what's happening in Kashmir. It is the Pakistanis who are infiltrating into Kashmir. And these are militants who are coming from there. This is the sort of myth and the story that they have been trying to plant, and to take away the focus of the world away from their atrocities, their gross atrocities in Kashmir.
Right.
So this was a myth that they had planted, and they keep on coming out with such fabricated stories.
Right.
And this was one of them. So Pakistan is saying this is all false, this is all lies, which it is. And we would like to show to our foreign VIPs and military people, whosoever is wanting, including what they are saying, the Indians, the generalists, so that this is an open invitation to the people who can then write in the media and or tell their governments that this is all false, what has been said by the Indians. So I think Pakistan is so confident of itself. It also wants to show that the difference between their part of Kashmir and the Indian part of Kashmir, the way that we are so open, the people are so satisfied, so happy over here, and the type of atrocities that are being committed on the other side, and the type of gross human right violations taking place across.
Sir, the Indian envoy in Pakistan, who's the Deputy High Commissioner who's here right now, Mr. Ahluwalia, what is the reason why he didn't go along with the other diplomats and journalists to see this place? How come he's not supporting his army's claim of there being terror camps?
Well, I think he would be embarrassed, because what would happen is that there is nothing to show there. So he doesn't want to be a party to be embarrassed. I think that is the only way that I look at it. Because if there was any validity or credibility in their claim, then he should have accompanied and then pointed and said that, well, this is not the place that we were saying, this is the place, or whatever it is,
Right. So, what is the, now, in your opinion, what is the end game that India wants in all of this? Because, okay, there's a situation in Kashmir. There's the 79th day of the lockdown over there. And although Indian authorities claim that normalcy is being returned, but even that is a myth because people are saying it has not returned to normal. And now there's all this aggression across the line of control. This is really provoking Pakistan, and obviously Pakistan gave a response, and we went and we attacked their bunkers on the Indian side. Now the situation is heating up. What are the designs of India over here right now? Do they want a war with Pakistan?
Well, what I think is that they want to keep the pressure on Pakistan. They want to divert the attention of the international community and their own people, that there is nothing wrong with Kashmir. It is really the violations that are taking place from the other side, which means ours. And we are responding to them, and we are protecting our part of Kashmir, and we are defending India.
Okay.
This is the sort of impression they are trying to give to the world. The main thing is that they are trying to divert attention
From
and
the
also to
actual
keep full pressure on Pakistan and on the Pakistan military. It's a part of an isolation, larger isolation of Pakistan.
But sir, it's not working because
Yeah.
isolating Pakistan is not
It's
working
not possible.
in
No,
the
but,
international forum, as
yeah,
we've seen.
you're 100% right. This is exactly the position. But the fact is that they are pursuing that policy. It's different, it's not working because there is no substance in it. There is no reality in what they are doing or saying.
Fair enough.
So, but there is also an element of expediency as far as the international community is concerned. They know the facts, but you know, they are not prepared to express them, or they are not prepared to sort of say this to the Indians that, you know, you are doing the wrong thing because they have business interests, commercial interests, strategic interests with India, and that is why they keep quiet. And that is why you find that there is greater news of Hong Kong than there is news of what is
Absolutely.
happening in Kashmir.
Well, this is what Prime Minister Imran Khan also said, that you see on the, at least the television, because you see in media, as far as the print media is concerned, a lot is being written about Kashmir. However, on TV channels, you only see the protests in Hong Kong. Now, he said that if this had not been a Muslim majority region, then there would have been a lot more attention there and a lot more would have been done, because naturally when you see a loss of life in, say, the US, I mean, it's a big deal, or if, you know, anywhere in Europe or whatever. So what is the reason why Muslims, and where these kinds of atrocities happen against Muslims, why is it that the world stays silent on that?
One is, of course, there is a basic prejudice, I would say. But apart from that also, that you see the Muslim countries are relatively very dependent on the West. And when it comes to the other country, like for instance India in this case, they have a lot of commercial and business interests, strategic interests, as I said. So you know, you can compare. So expediency demands that they don't say anything. Why would they, if they have to sell their Rafales? Or you know, a new aircraft, and which is $1 billion. I don't know how many, you know, 100 billions, 27 billion dollars, whatever it be, the amount. So it is, and then a great prospects and potential for India buying all that. But Pakistan's economy is poor, very poor at this time. It's in distress. It does not have that capacity. Size is also less. So all these factors do play when it comes to, you know, countries trying to deal
taking you more seriously.
seriously.
Sir, so what recourse at this point does Pakistan have when this aggression takes place across the line of control? Now, it's a volatile region. We've said this again and again, and world attention needs to be here. But what exactly are the actions that we can take?
Well, I think at the moment what we are doing is we are in a state of readiness. And Pakistan understands that, you know, we have to remain and make sacrifices to stay in a state of readiness despite our economy, despite our other priorities. We have to set them aside because to protect the country's sort of integrity is most important, and not allow India to hegemonize us. You know that. So we are doing our best at the moment, in that regard, I think,
Right.
with great sacrifices. I mean, can you imagine the extent of sacrifices that Pakistan is making? I think this aspect is not highlighted as much as it should. I mean, look at the number of lives that are lost,
Yes.
of both soldiers as well as civilians.
Civilians, right.
Every day, there is hardly a day where, where you don't hear of this news, sad news.
Absolutely,
And so-
but India is also now increasing. It's sort of previously also the Foreign Office has said that we don't want to enter an arms race. It seems that in South Asia, India is building up its own stockpiles of weapons. So how can we avoid that, not getting into an arms race? We also have to defend ourselves.
Well, I think we don't have to sort of match them for every step that they take. But what is necessary, which we are doing at the moment, is to ensure that India is not in a position to hegemonize or attack us. And we are in a position to defend ourselves very effectively. I think one is the nuclear factor has been there for the only reason that we think that will bring about some sort of sanity amongst the Indian aggressive designs.
Right.
It would act as a very effective deterrence against India's designs, even at the conventional level. So this is the central sort of and then apart from that, we have a highly trained and a very effective conventional force at the moment, which is by far one of the most experienced today in the world. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, because we have been involved in real battle conditions for the last several years.
Yeah.
And it has made them very battle hardened and extremely well trained, highly motivated. So that is also a great compensation for any lesser
Yes. Absolutely. I think DGISPR had also tweeted earlier when the Indians received their Rafale aircraft, that it doesn't matter about the aircraft, it matters who's sitting behind it, because our soldiers they're so competent and they're so well trained, and we're very lucky like that. And sir, so now the question remains, we've been talking about this topic now for the last number of months, at least 2.5 months since the 5th August decision of India to revoke the special status of Kashmir. So we've been talking about it. Now, the end result, what everyone wants, is to have dialogue between the two countries. How can that be brought about? Will it have to be through pressure? Because obviously at the moment you have Prime Minister Modi's government that refuses to talk and keeps blaming Pakistan for being a terrorist state. So how do you bring about that very important dialogue, which all the countries of the world are saying there has to be a dialogue?
Well, certainly there has to be a dialogue, whether it is tomorrow, day after a year, after 2 years, after 5 years. You cannot avoid that because we are neighbors. But the thing is that at this point of time, India is pursuing such a highly sort of an antagonistic and hostile policy towards Pakistan that its whole objective is to isolate it. When you are trying to isolate, trying to project Pakistan as a terror-producing country and sort of, and all false and all bogus,
Right.
but just to put a blanket or a cover on its own designs and what it is doing, then obviously it will not talk. We have to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
And then, you see, the thing is, what is happening in Kashmir, and it will continue to happen for a long time. It is not going to stop. It would keep on getting worse. And so, till such time that the situation in Kashmir does not normalize, from their point of view, I think they will continue to have this posture against Pakistan. But how long can that continue? That is a big question mark.
Yes.
And what is the end game? Because it will also start.
Exactly.
You see, India thinks that it is too large a country, and the other reasons that we just discussed, that their ability to have a very strong commercial and strategic and so on economic ties with other countries. So it thinks that this will fade away and it can keep on suppressing the Kashmiris. But you see, you can't continue to do that for too long. You have to somehow or the other come to some sort of an understanding with them and give them their rights.
Right.
And that is what Pakistan is asking for.
Right, exactly. Now, the DGISPR also mentioned that the Pakistani journalists have been very responsible in this whole issue, whereas Indian media has not been. And any responsible journalist will want to speak about peace. So that is the ultimate result that we want. Now, sir, what I would like to ask you is that there have been other regions in the world that have resolved issues like this peacefully. For example, you have many examples, but if you look at the region between France and Germany Alsace-Lorraine, that region where you have Strasbourg as the capital, people there don't even remember that there was ever a conflict, and there's a free flow of people. And I think now it's with Germany, and in the past it's been with France. It's gone back and forth. So how have these disputes been resolved? And what can we see? What is the light at the end of the tunnel?
You see the disputes have been resolved because both the countries did come out with a solution, and they engaged in dialogue. And of course, the World War II and so on were also responsible. And they realized that, the energies of such countries were being dissipated in wars, instead of the economic prosperity of their people. Sorry. So it is very important that we look at the people rather than try to sort of, engage in conflict for years and years.
Right.
Imagine for a moment that the relations between India and Pakistan improve as a consequence of India trying to take positive measures to give freedom to the people of Kashmir. The whole subcontinent will transform itself, because this is the only dispute that has kept the two countries in such a hostile posture against each other.
Absolutely. So what's happening right now in Kashmir? Now we're talking about how those regions which have acquired peace, they came to the table because for economic reasons, so that their
and also realized that the destiny of both the countries would be transformed radically, in a better way if they did come to an understanding. Otherwise, there will be continuous wars and loss of life, and the economy of the countries would be in deep distress.
Yes.
So I think one has to see the advantages also.
Yes.
But you see, the thing is that India wants that Pakistan should accept, and the people of Kashmir should accept a one-sided decision, which is not possible.
Right.
You have to engage. You have to engage, and this is Pakistan's very sensible and reasonable sort of a approach that it has been taking. And as you rightly pointed out, that if the international community, the United Nations Security Council, etc., were more effective, it would have been possible to put some sort of a pressure on India. But that is not going to happen, as we see.
Absolutely. So, okay, so the reason why other places have achieved peace is to have greater, for the benefit of the people there, and economic prosperity.
And also they came to some sort of an agreement about the territories
so in the
that
case
were in dispute.
Right. Okay. So now, in the case of Kashmir, India must be suffering economically. You're already hearing about it. It's being seen as a dangerous region. So, okay, what would you like to comment about that?
Well, I would say that it is suffering economically, not just because of Kashmir, but there are other factors as well.
Yeah.
But this may be one of the factors. But I think the policies that Prime Minister Modi is pursuing, the sort of a Hindu dominance, and also not only Hindu dominance, but of a certain sect of the Hindus' dominance, the sort of elite sects and so on. So I think that is also one of the factors which has created, and then spending so much of money in trying to sort of match China, suppress Pakistan, trying to sort of dominate the region in sort of very negative sort of an approach.
Right.
So I think these are also factors which do affect, and then also the world economy is also slowing down in a way because of what is happening between China and US at the moment, the trade war.
So it would benefit India and Pakistan to resolve this issue and have dialogue, which our Prime Minister has been trying to do and has not gotten much response from the other side. Thank you so much, General Talat Masood. Thank you for joining us today. After the break, we will go on with our next topic, and we'll be talking about how our US envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has spoken with leaders of China and Russia and the European Union so as to bring about a peace dialogue again and a peaceful settlement in Afghanistan. Stay with us, please. Hello and welcome back to Newsroom. We now have with us Raja Faisal, who's an international affairs expert. Thank you so much for joining us. Sir, what we're going to talk to you about is how now in the recent days, US envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has gone to Brussels and he's met with the leaders of China. He's met with people from China and Russia as well as the European Union, friendly countries, in order to understand how to bring about this peace process again in Afghanistan. As we know that the talks over there have been stalled after a US soldier was killed in Afghanistan. President Trump said no more talks with the Taliban. However, now there seems to be some sort of a willingness to resume the dialogue. So what would you like to comment on that?
Well, first of all, I must congratulate you. This is an amazing set, and I think in coming days there would be more programs from here, and it would be really good. Secondly, about Afghan peace process. First of all, I would like to mention here that this Afghan peace deal means so much to Zalmay Khalilzad. Why? Because his, diplomatic career, I mean, he's been a diplomat for so many years, and I think this case is going to be the key. Whenever he would be remembered in the history books, he would be remembered for his part, what he played in Afghan peace deal.
Right, and he's been working on this for the past 1 year now.
Oh yes,
and having talks with all the parties involved.
And let's be very fair. I think he's been working excellent. His work is being shown right now when we are seeing that US it just pulled out of the deal. Still he's going everywhere and trying to bring them on the table, which is excellent of him, and I think credit goes to him. He met with the Chinese in the Brussels, and he is in touch with the Russians as well regarding Afghan peace deal. Yes, there was a hiccup when we saw that after the death of one of the soldiers, he was killed, American soldiers, he was killed in Afghanistan. Why? Because there is no, peace truce going on between both of the parties.
Absolutely.
I mean, ceasefire is not there. What they need to do is they need to work on restoring peace in terms of, they need to struck a deal for ceasefire first. And I think that's what Zalmay Khalilzad is, working for. And I think in all of this episode, Pakistan played a key role when, as you know, the Taliban, the leadership of Taliban, they met with Pakistan's foreign minister and with DG ISI of Pakistan. It was something which actually brought the peace deal back on the track. And later on, Zalmay Khalilzad met with the Taliban leader as well. And I think this is very hopeful. We
and
can
I think
never.
Pakistan has brought together the Taliban and the US leadership together from the beginning.
Exactly, and there is very important thing that previously China and Russia they've been ignored, sort of ignored. Why? Because it was considered as they have nothing to do in Afghanistan, and as America was controlling, trying to control Afghanistan and having a government which is suitable to them, but of course peace wasn't there, and everyone knows that more than 70% of Afghanistan is not under the control of the current setup. Reason being, the current setup is I always say that it's a sort of setup which was brought to Afghanistan in the C-130s of US, and they were dropped at Bagram Air Base, and they, at once they got into Kabul and they took the offices and they started running the show. People of Afghanistan, majority of them, they do not accept them. Reason being, if you think about the people of Afghanistan, they have suffered a lot. And they know one thing, that people who were standing there fighting against, still they consider Americans as their enemy, And who was fighting against the enemy? It was Taliban,
And the majority of the casualties here have been civilians. There have been a lot of
Civilians.
civilian
Yes,
casualties.
that
The people
is-
of Pakistan have really suffered in all of this conflict.
Exactly.
And
I
they're
mean,
the ones who
70,000
stand the most to gain from a peace
Pakistan is a
settlement.
country that had nothing to do with this war, and Pakistan gave 70,000 lives.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what kind of other country we can talk about who actually had nothing to do with something and still they gave so many lives, and more than 120 billions of our economic, it just
Cost,
suffered.
yeah.
Economic cost was the worst one. Why? Because we're still facing that problem. And I think now inclusion of China, Zalmay Khalilzad trying to contact China and trying to contact Russia, bringing them on the table.
So let
it
me
means
ask
a
you
lot.
this. What is the stake that both those countries, China and Russia, have in Afghanistan? China naturally does not want a rise of extremism.
Exactly.
And Russia has had a historical sort of relationship in Afghanistan with the whole invasion in the 80s where it was defeated. So what are their stakes right now?
Well, right now, what China and Russia want is they have seen that in the region, of course, they share the region with Pakistan and Afghanistan and, all of the Central Asian republics. They used to be part of Russia, the Soviet Unions, and they have historic relations to each other. And when it comes to China, of course, China is expanding itself, like it's expanding its economy. They want the secure economic routes. They want to secure their economic expansion, and that can only be possible through dialogue in Afghanistan. Why? Because if peace is not restored in Afghanistan, that would mean that the economic expansion they are up to, it would still be having a constant danger, because they are giving importance to CPAC. Pakistan's CPAC would be, very important for economic goals of China. So it is very important.
And the Belt and Road Initiative is sort of inclusive of everybody in the region, which would include Afghanistan as well.
Yeah, you already know that they have a plan to touch Europe through Russia, and that too relies upon peace in the region. When I say region, then everything initiates from Afghanistan. Why? Because Americans are present in there.
Right.
So it's a sort of very important thing for China and Russia as well.
Okay, fair enough. So now U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said yesterday that the Afghans shouldn't misconstrue the sudden pullout that the U.S. had from Syria, where they withdrew 1,000 troops in one go so that Turkey could invade and have a fight their territory that they wanted, the buffer zone, against the Kurds. Now, what he said also is that the Afghans shouldn't think that this is going to be a similar troop withdrawal in Afghanistan. It will not be sudden. It won't be a lot of people. They've already withdrawn around 2,000 additional troops, according to the Department of Defense. And how is it expected to happen in Afghanistan exactly?
Well, number one, I would just go step by step. Number one, Pakistan never wants it. That like before in 1989, Americans they just went out of here and they left the mess. As Hillary Clinton once said in one of her speeches as well, that we just kind of left Pakistan with the Stingers and Pakistan with the Talibans and Mujahideen.
So a sudden withdrawal has been detrimental in the past.
Yeah. It was very bad for the region. Why? Because they left Afghanistan in a state which was fragile. There was not a political, there were political insecurities. That region saw for next two to 3 decades. I mean, still we are reaping what they saw in 1989. So now, of course, they know it, that if they leave, Pakistan would be having reservations on that.
Yeah.
That sudden withdrawal of the U.S. troops right now. I mean, earlier they had 15,000, and now after in 1 year they have squiggled out 2,000 of the troops.
In the past year.
Yeah. Now they have 13,000. It's Pakistan that has reservations, and the Afghan government, the current setup, they have the reservations as well,
And
because they
also-
want to carry on with the peace process.
Right.
And the very important thing out of it is that, you know, this message shows that Pentagon is not out of the Afghan peace deal. Why? Because if they are still giving the hints that, you know, if we go out of Afghanistan, it would not be sudden like we did in Syria. As you know, that they just suddenly came out of Syria. Why? Because YPG, they were training YPG, they were supporting YPG. YPG was initially, you know, fighting against the Syrians, and then they were, as they are next to the Turkish border, they penetrate in the Turkish territories, and they do what once we were seeing coming from Afghanistan. You know, Turkey was experiencing terrorism just because YPG was staging terror in there. And who was actually, you know, helping them? Americans, you know, and it was open truth. And Turkish knew about it. That's why Turkish entered in. With the Turkey, there is another problem, that they have a huge burden of Syrian immigrants, and they want to deal with that matter as well. So what they have done is they have entered inside Syria to create safe zones for the Syrian immigrants. So the immigrants who actually went into Turkey, they want to
they can be resettled back
and
there.
they would be giving them you know, all of the shelters and everything in there.
Right. So now coming back to Afghanistan, President Donald Trump has also said that he sees Afghanistan as the Harvard of terrorism. Now, the Defense Secretary Mark Esper, he said that the US still faces a virulent terrorist threat that originated in the form of Al-Qaeda, and now it's in the form of Taliban and ISIS-K, which is the Afghan branch of IS. So that threat is very much still there. So how will this withdrawal be best handled so as to avoid those mistakes of the past that we were talking about?
Well, to be very fair, ISIS-K, it was already having, like, you know, Taliban were dealing with them very well. You know, a couple of years ago, what we saw was that Taliban had a, you know, crackdown on, in the Nangarhar province as well. And ISIS-K, they are there, but the number is, you know, shrinked with the time. Why? Because, you know, these kind of outfits, band outfits, they always need funding, and who funds them, that matters. And there are speculations about America as well that has been funding them. And John McCain, when ISIS started, John McCain, he was, you know, seen in the footages as well that, you know, Americans, they have been actively supporting them against the Syrian government, because firstly they thought that they were the ones who were actually against the Syrian government, and they just wanted Assad out of it. So that's why they've been doing it. About Afghanistan, yes, they are, you know, right about it, that there are elements, but when it comes to the outfit or the people, you want to have peace and you want to talk about peace, and you are seeking a peace deal, you should not be, first of all, you should not be considering them terrorists anymore. You know, Al-Qaeda, yes, they were terrorists, and later on, few of the factions of Taliban, they became terrorists. But when it comes to Taliban, they did not do anything out of Afghanistan.
Right.
You know, whatever they did, it was just to, you know, bring peace in Afghanistan and to oust the US forces.
Absolutely.
And that's what it was.
Right. Thank you so much, Raja Faisal, for joining us on today's program. And now we're going to talk about the next story that we have. Our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has managed to secure another victory and have another term. And however, this time he's going to be with a minority government. The Liberals, Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party has retained power in a narrow Canadian election, but in his win, he will now be Prime Minister of a minority government. The Liberals are projected to win 157 seats, 13 short of a majority, and will find it harder to pass legislation in Mr. Trudeau's second term. The opposition Conservatives are expected to win the popular vote, but have not translated that into seats. So now let's move on to the stock market. We have online with us Mr. Basharatullah Khan, who's going to tell us about the latest movements in the stock market. Mr. Khan, thank you so much for joining us.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum, ji.
Can you update us about how the markets did today?
Yes, today market finished in positive territory by day end after a volatile session. Market has been on a downward trend during the past week or so. It has fallen almost 4% because of the planned opposition rallies and agitation by month end. So we have seen some correction in recent days, but today it managed to close in positive territory. Overall, the sentiment remain a bit, investor prefer to be on the sideline because of this planned agitation. Until this new phase is over, I think the market should improve going forward. But ahead of that, we might see some slow trading days over the next few days.
Mr. Khan, how have the markets responded to the recent economic figures that we're seeing, the improvement in the current account deficit and the trade deficit, etc., and the increase in foreign investment in Pakistan?
Exactly. Market has been taking these numbers very positively. Besides the improvement at the macro level as seen as reflected in current account deficit improvement, besides that, the most significant thing has been corporate results have been pretty good for the leading sectors, especially like the banks, oil and gas, fertilizer, textiles, for this September quarter. So in overall, keeping in view valuation of the market and improvement at the macro level, market looks good for investment at this stage. But the only concern right now is this planned agitations.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Basharatullah Khan, for joining us. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for our program today. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsroom, and that's bye-bye from me, Sharmeen Ali, and our team on Newsroom.